Sorry. Okay, cool. We're live now. We were just doing a practice run because I do not know how to use Crowdcast for the first time. But now we are actually live with today's session. I'm Ross, CEO and co-founder at Accord, co-hosting this session with the amazing community at Pavilion. And we're talking about all things that it takes for revenue leaders today in 2022 to win, how to balance all things, sales, marketing, success, product, etc., the crazy collaboration that it takes revenue leaders today to really drive success at high growth startups. To reiterate, we are kicking off the questions that Elizabeth put in the chat about where we're dialing in from and our favorite vacation spot. I'm going to try to bring equal excitement to where I'm dialing in from and my favorite vacation spot just a second ago. So I'm calling from Canada. It is very cold. My favorite vacation spot is sunny Turks and Caicos because it is the opposite of the weather in Toronto this winter. And I'll again pass it off to Olivier to share where he's dialing in from and a bit about his background. And then we'll go through some quick intros and we'll dive into the good stuff that's 329 people now have registered for today. So, yes.
All right, Ross. Well, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. It's good to catch up. And I see we have somebody from Montreal. So I grew up in Montreal. I currently live in Boulder, Colorado. I am president at Metadata. We are a B2B demand generation platform, and I oversee go-to-market. Like I said, I'm in Boulder, so it's a little cold. So today I feel like the Greek islands would be somewhere I would really like to be in.
Awesome. And then, Oscar, what about yourself?
Yeah. Hey everyone. I'm Oscar Moore. I'm currently in LA, but I'm based out of Charleston, South Carolina. I lead the user and customer experience team at Scratchpad, and we're in the business of making salespeople happy. And my favorite place to travel is Bermuda. So that's me. I'll pass it off to Kyle.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. Tropical theme here. Well, hi, nice to meet everyone. My name is Kyle Parrish. I lead the sales team at Figma. Been here for about 4 years now at this point. Based in the Bay Area, just north of San Francisco. Originally I was just talking to Oscar from Long Beach, the Southern California area. For myself, again, I think it's tough. Like, you want to go to new places, you want to go to old repeat destinations, but growing up in Southern California and being a surfer, I got a really soft spot for Mexico. So getting down to Todos Santos, down by the border, surfing, eating tacos, drinking a little mezcal. So I would go to Mexico right now if I could.
That sounds awesome. Well, hopefully a close second is being on today's webinar, nerding out about all things startups, revenue growth, a topic that I find super interesting and looks like a number of folks out there do as well, which is talking about how the lines between what typically, we're more siloed, sales, marketing, product, success, et cetera, are now getting super blurred with all, the new world of product-led growth, or just, a more transparent buying process, or CSMs being more commercial and being part of the sales process and adding value earlier, all of those things. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And we have, just got some quick intros from everyone here. But the reason why I'm really excited about this group is I think we have a really unique perspective from everyone here. I know, Olivier, you have a background leading sales at companies like G2 and now Metadata. That marketing perspective, I think you really understand. I know we have Kyle here from Dropbox and Figma, a super heavy product-led motion. I know Oscar doing really cool things around the world of CX and customer experience, blending that with sales and product and all those things. So I think we have a really unique perspective here to talk about these blurred lines and how to be successful, either as the revenue leader or someone on those teams. So maybe to kick things off before we get into some of those deep dive questions, maybe just go around and kind of talk about what that really means to each of us in a few words, high level, like what, is this, how have you been seeing this trend present itself? How have you seen this kind of, come to fruition the last few years? So maybe, Kyle, I'll pass it over to you to say a few words about, just like the topic as a whole and your kind of philosophy around, worlds colliding with all these different organizations.
Yeah, happy to kick things off. I think first and foremost, like working for a lot of product-led growth companies, I think Dropbox is now seen as like one of the earlier adopters of this model that had a B2C play. And then we built a B2B business and grew a pretty large sales team at one point out of that. But what I learned a lot from that experience and at Figma now is like everything from, marketing, top of funnel, where are customers coming from? How are you finding them? Is there some level of a freemium product to use? Once they're using a freemium product, how do you think about where to put paywalls? Is it a delightful experience, which comes into user experience and support? Is there a broken out team, someone who has responsibility of revenue growth, someone who has responsibility of CSAT and, other kinds of metrics that are super important to the business. But I think in today's world, you're seeing a lot of companies moving in, I think some faction of product-led growth. But across the board, whether you're an early stage startup or more like a scale up is where I'd say Figma's at today, communication across teams for the people that are in those core roles and across leadership is critical. So I think that, being early on this journey, whether you're a founder, early leader, member of the team, how do you make sure so that the culture doesn't start to fall down as you grow? Like every company wants to grow and be successful. That's kind of obvious, right? But losing those lines of communication, you really start to see it show up in the customer experience. And then all of a sudden, you see it show up in revenue and churn and all of these things. So I think it's really critical. And I think that the way the world's heading and these teams working closer together and thinking about an ultimate kind of loop together customer journey across all these different teams, it's really important. And maybe 5-10 years ago, it was like offsites for these, one single groups. And now it's like leaders getting together and talking about, okay, let's not talk about what's important for me and the team that I'm leading. Let's talk about it from the customer's perspective. What's the experience from hitting our website, to submitting a lead form, to signing up for the product, to buying something, to giving feedback, to using our admin, console experience, and data across all of that. But how do you look at it from that lens as opposed to, hey, I lead customer experience. That's all I care about, right? Because ultimately we know that falls apart as you continue to grow and scale.
Yeah, no, that's a helpful perspective. I think big takeaway there is just the shift from, maybe very tactical, like those team offsites. Hey, as a sales team or support team or marketing team, we're going to go off. Now you're seeing this trend of leadership across those, kind of talk about that entire customer journey. For sure. And thank you. The owl painting, I did paint that myself. Appreciate that.
Nice.
But Oscar, would love to hear your perspective of this, again, coming from Scratchpad and leading, this really unique new team around customer experience. How do you think about coordinating across, and balancing all these different organizations?
Yeah. I think Kyle hit on a lot of it, but I think from my observation, it starts with not being confined by what sales, marketing, customer success used to be, or what it is in the traditional sense, and not allowing that to box you into this one way of thinking. And like Kyle said, starting from the customer, when you think about the customer and what their expectations are when they land on your website or when they meet with your sales team or your CX team or whoever it is, what is that expectation they have? And how do you create an extremely delightful experience and lead them through it in a way that is memorable? That when they get through it, they're just like, wow, that was fun. I enjoyed that. That was like nothing else I've ever had. So yeah, that's really how from being here at Scratchpad and just my observation is just not being able to like separate yourselves from the status quo of what sales, marketing, customer success is, and then starting with the customer. And then when you start with the customer, you understand, okay, what are the jobs to be done to create that experience? And then once you know what those jobs are, you can start to assign them out to different groups. Who are the experts? Who are the people internally that can do those jobs at the highest level? And let that appreciate how things work. But yeah, that's
totally. Yeah, similar thread in terms of it needs to come from, again, more that leadership level and bringing everyone together than that bottoms up from a particular organization. But yeah, Olivia, anything to add or agree or disagree with?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that we do here is that, we have a revenue meeting every week, right? So everybody that touches revenue joins that call. And that is really important that we look at it as revenue, right? We're all driving for customer happiness and success and for revenue at the end of the day. And so those are the most important things. So instead of, breaking down the teams by, sales, marketing, and CS, I think it's critical as a leader that, you explain to the team that everyone is responsible for revenue. Even if you're in engineering, right? You have to make the product better so it's easier to use, it's stickier, and it becomes a bigger part of, their day-to-day job functions. So that would be the first thing that I highlight. The other thing, and I think Oscar kind of touched on this, is, you've got to understand your ICP, right? Ideal customer profile, because different personas, and I've sold to different people over the years, is if you're selling to a marketer or you're selling to an engineer, those people want to buy a completely different way, right? Salespeople, marketers, they actually like talking to people, right? Engineers, for the most part, I'm generalizing obviously, but they don't want to talk to people. They want to say, give me your tool, let me play with it. And if I like it, I'll buy it. If not, I don't have to talk to anybody. And so you have to definitely understand what is your ICP. And in some cases, right, you have some tools like Scratchpad is awesome, right? My team uses it, super easy to use. They have a freemium model. That's great. My tool, I can't do that, right? Because our tool touches Salesforce, it touches Marketo, it touches LinkedIn, Google, Facebook. So we have to dive into a bunch of, DPAs, data transfer, data processing. We have a long, legal procurement, sales cycle, and there's nothing I can let them play around with. But I've done a couple of things to ensure that people who want to play with the tool can, right? And so we've partnered with Walnut, which essentially, lets you use the tool and basically makes, images of, your web pages. And so people are not necessarily in the tool, but they feel like they are. And then it's like a guided tour. And there's other products like Tutorial to do that. And I think that's a critical component. If you're selling a product that is expensive, I'd say like at least $10,000 a year, you should definitely have that in there, because if you can't let them use the freemium offering, they should at least be able to see what it's like. And one of the things that's happened I've been in sales for 20 years. People don't really want to talk to salespeople until they're ready to buy. And so you have to be really conscientious about the type of content you have on your website and how you engage with those people. So if somebody comes to your website, can they engage with your content? Is there content based on the roles, right? And so for us, we sell to CMOs, VPs, directors, and then we sell to, campaign managers. Well, they all have different goals. They're all measured differently. They all care about different things. And so you have to make sure that you have content that is going to resonate with them. And two, you have to give them an ability to engage with the tool, even if they can't really, it's not a, true freemium model. At least they can play with it and see what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point that I think is going to tie in really well with, I think, the burning question from everyone is kind of like, how does this new world of, some companies, like you're saying, there is a world of product-led growth and people testing out and kind of bottoms up, but that's not true for every company. So how do you figure out how to balance people wanting to touch and feel the product and learn more about it and do more research on their side, while having potentially a price point in a product that doesn't make sense to get value out of it quickly just from a single player use case? So excited to dive into that. I think before we get into it, I know we have 89 people already tuned in, listening in. Definitely want to make sure that it's not just our voices here, but the audience as well. So we have both a chat, but also an ask a question tab at the bottom of Crowdcast. So if folks have burning questions for amazing industry revenue leaders here, feel free to type in some of your questions, things that are keeping you up at night or you want another perspective on, so we can also dive into some of those questions. So yeah, as we maybe go through the next one, if folks want to drop some questions in there, I'll jump in and we'll answer some of the ones that are top of mind. But yeah, kind of driving it back to Olivia, your point, which is cool. That's coming from you, one of the only products that's represented here that isn't just pure bottoms up, but talking about how people want to buy today. They want to understand the product better. They don't want to have to go through the entire process themselves, which kind of mirrors the change in the B2C buying experience the last 5 or 10 years. People want to do more research before they want to read content. They want to understand the brand and the offering and competitors, et cetera. So my kind of question for the group here is, how do we balance this, kind of drive towards a more product-led, content-led sales experience, evaluation and validation process with a sales assisted customer journey? Because everyone here kind of oversees a team that are actual people helping people buy products. But there's kind of that spectrum. And I think we all believe that there's an opportunity for customers to do more research and to learn more about the product and the company by themselves. So yeah, super interesting kind of, question across all these organizations. So yeah, Kyle, maybe I'll throw it back to you for that. Coming in with, basically pure bottoms up freemium model from Figma X number of years ago. And now you're just saying you're hiring and adding on hundreds of salespeople this year. Curious to hear kind of how you balance both of those models.
Yeah. And I mean, just to give you some context on the company itself, I mean, typically, I think the cycles are coming shorter as product-led growth becomes a core strategy for a lot of businesses. But Figma was started in 2012. I didn't join until 2018, and there were no salespeople prior to that. So they launched their freemium product, I want to say in 2017, I believe. So long time of building, building a product.
5 years.
And getting some like early, signals of product market fit, which I think early on, there's not really a clear line of what that looks like. But I think even when we built the business and kind of playing off a comment I'm reading here, DePisha wrote, where like engineers don't want to talk to people because it's not that they don't like salespeople. I came in with the mindset, having worked really closely with designers at Dropbox. I didn't know a ton about UI, UX back in 2011 when I joined Dropbox, but over the time in my experience there, I kind of woke up to all of the different factors playing into design. And when I came into it, I kind of had this similar assumption. I'm like, oh, great. Designers are going to hate salespeople. This is not going to go well. Like, how do we do this? But, I kind of just scrapped all of that, threw it out the window. And we thought about building a sales team and a sales culture that really understood the customer, understood that we needed to know enough to kind of be dangerous and be armed with like their day-to-day, their perspective, and ultimately be consultative and be partners to them. And coming into it, it was actually the complete opposite. Designers historically had not been sold to. So you're going into these sales calls and doing discovery with these customers. And it's like, you have to get another notepad just to write all down that they're giving to you. They're telling you the entire environment. They were excited. We supported and leaned on a lot of champions early on in the business. And that was huge because they help you find and kind of guide you towards the buying process. But to your point of how do you manage this self-serve bottoms up velocity thing versus more of a traditional top-down sales motion, we're now at the point where we're actually trying to do both, and there is space for both. So we've got 3 different channels. We have completely self-serve, where you can just go buy the product. We have a pro tier, a business tier, and a recently launched enterprise tier. And so anyone who's a shareholder of a business, who's a part of the team, you want to see that being healthy and thriving and flourishing. Then we've got sales assisted. And so we've got SMB sales segments, a mid-market sales segment, and the enterprise. And in SMB and mid-market, mainly SMB especially, you're going to see a little bit more on there's going to be one call closes. There's going to be people that buy over emails. There's going to be those velocity type motions. And our job as a sales leadership team and as a sales team is not to create arbitrary friction to do some, warranted sales methodology process. If Ross is ready to buy 10 seats of Figma, let's get you on the product.
And you're not going to say, wait to get pricing for next call, right, Kyle? You're not going to have your rep be like, no. You need to hit stage 3 on Salesforce or HubSpot before I can let you buy this thing.
Yeah, exactly. And even all the way to enterprise, we have million dollar spend customers. We're working with a healthy percentage of the Fortune 100, but we've got a very velocity driven motion of enterprise as well. And so it's down to the manager and the reps who are working with these customers. Sometimes it's going to make sense to get you on the product because we know that once customers get on the product, they expand beyond just the core design team and they get other personas and to the ICP example, right? Like other use cases naturally that you couldn't even sell into until they tried it. It's kind of the blessing and the curse of land and expand. Sometimes customers were like, you're a design tool. I'm only, putting our design team on it. But once we get people onto the platform, you get all these other use cases where people want to edit in Figma, but it just didn't naturally kind of occur to them. So how do we balance that velocity motion and moving faster and then also working 8, 9, 12, 15-month sales cycles with some of the largest companies in the world? But the trade-off has to be that they're going to spend a lot more and support a lot larger base of users out of the gates. And so, yeah, it's an interesting problem, but I think most companies, you have to have that balance. But velocity allows you to be really consistent and not have lumpy months or quarters in terms of enterprise.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think one of the biggest takeaways there, and this is a common thread that I hear from especially like high growth early stage companies that are needing to layer on a lot more sales and people involved that might have initial success from a product perspective, is like, what's the culture? What's going to happen to the culture of my company? And if I bring in just sales and I have this perspective, and it reminds me a lot of what Oscar shared earlier, right? Like throw everything that you know about these typical organizations out the window and take a very first principles approach. Who are our buyers? And Olivia even mentioned this at the beginning, like who is our ICP? Let's take a first principles approach to that. How do they like to buy? What are the types of conversations that they want to have? Is it synchronous, async, et cetera? And build your entire experience around that. And Kyle, like you said, I think a lot of people shy away from becoming an expert. I know metadata hires mainly CS folks that were actual marketers before. So like take a very first principles approach to this. Like it's really interesting to see some of the creative ways that I've seen revenue teams kind of grow in the last, even 2-3 years versus the last 5 or 10. So yeah, I think a lot for folks to think about there, Kyle. But I'm seeing some questions around the role of CS and where they sit in the organization with some of this product-led growth motion. So Oscar, I think you'd have a great perspective on that coming from Scratchpad. So yeah, curious to get your thoughts on some of that.
Yeah, and we're building our, I guess you would call it traditional customer success team now, but historically we've had this team called a revenue workflow specialist team that has been completely focused on just driving value for the end user of Scratchpad.
Yeah, this is so interesting. Everyone needs to be paying attention to this because I chatted with Oscar about this and it was like blew my mind around their perspective on this team. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the idea of the team, which this all goes back to just knowing your customers. So the first thing I think bottoms up growth companies struggle with is when someone signs up for your product, that person that's signing up, are they actually your customer? Like that's one question I think everyone should ask themselves. Because the mistake you make is if they're not your customer and you go hard on them with sales, you miss the opportunity to plant a seed. You miss an opportunity to build a champion. You miss an opportunity to really drive value in whatever the org is you're trying to break into because you don't understand. So the first thing we know is the people who are signing up for our product are salespeople. And salespeople are the users of Scratchpad, but they're not our customers. They can be. I mean, you can buy an individual seat, but really that's not who our customer is. Our customer is metadata, right? It's not Oscar, the rep at metadata. So when Oscar signs up, our goal is actually just to create value for Oscar. How do we help Oscar? How do we learn, what use cases Oscar has? How do we set those use cases up? How do we just make Oscar's life easier? How do we build a champion? And that's pretty much what we've been doing up until now, is like just completely focusing on when people sign up for our product, how do we create champions? And I think the value of creating champions is that when people come into your orbit as a company, they have a certain expectation of what they're going to get. And companies can either miss that expectation, they can beat that expectation, or they can exceed it. I think a lot of us, in terms of our companies, we focus on meeting the expectation, but the problem with meeting it is that when you meet an expectation, it's not memorable. So no one's going to go out and tell their friends or tell their colleagues or tell their managers about that experience. And what that does for you as the org is that means you have to evangelize for yourself. You have to invest heavily in marketing. You have to bring SDRs. You have to go to the world and say, hey, look at me. Yeah. But when you focus on creating an experience that it exceeds that, you create delight. And then now you start to build these advocates, these people who genuinely love the product, they love the team, they love the experience, and they have no other choice but to tell other people, because it's just like, hey, I just had this experience. I'm using this product. It's changing my life. You got to try this thing out. So that's really what's been driving us to start there, is just how do we create this delightful experience that is memorable so that people, so basically, we take our time, we focus on taking on the problems of salespeople and finding solutions and building product and whatever it might be. And in return, they take on our problem, which we need people to know about Scratchpad. We need people to sign up. We need customers. And they help us there. But it's really, I think it's because we focused on that giving part first. Like we give unconditionally and we focus on their needs before our own. But I don't know if that answers the question.
It definitely does. It definitely does. I think it's such a unique perspective. Like even before people are customers, like that's when you really want to invest. If you're a forward-thinking company and you're really planning to grow, like all these VC-backed companies want to and aspire to be, you need to give a lot more first. And I think that's very in line with some of the things that I've learned, at least from following Metadata's growth in the last couple of years around some of their content and marketing approach. So Olivier, I'd love to hear your thoughts, kind of like mirroring some of what Scratchpads I think has done from this workflow team in terms of building this community and content and like all the amazing things that are being put out there to really give first to potential customers.
Yeah, and I think it depends if you are joining a category that already exists or you're trying to build a new category. So in our case, we are doing something that no other software can do, which is multi-varied experimentation. So instead of building, marketing campaigns one at a time into channels, we can essentially connect your channels and build hundreds and not thousands of marketing campaigns in minutes. And then we optimize everything because we're connected to your tech stack and we optimize the revenue. No one does that. So we've basically latched on to ABM, right? We get on a call. The first thing we say, we're not an ABM vendor, but we're on the ABM grid on G2. I spent 4 years at G2, and I know how important it is to be on a grid and have very high satisfaction because that is searchable. People don't search for autonomous demand generation, right? They don't know that exists, but they know ABM exists because it's been around for a long time. And so I think it's really important when somebody, is trying to figure out how can I resolve my problem, and they turn to Google, how can you how can you come up, right? And so one easy way is, G2 is really, I spent 4 years at G2. They have really, really good, web pages that you can research software, you can compare products and so on. So we wanted to be there. But now we're going to be building a new category this year. And so, we have a category creation podcast that my CEO runs, and sometimes I'll do some guest episodes and we just learn about, category creations from people who have done it in the past. Because that's one thing that we're trying to do this year is actually build our new category. And when you're category one, you can't really build that. And so for us is we have to wait for other software vendors to pick up on, our differentiator and go to market so that we can do it. And ZoomInfo, came up with something last week, which is operating system for marketing, which is essentially what we are. And so, I think now, we'll be able to build off of that. And, but that's the one thing that you need. If you are in a category where there's already issues and people know what those issues are, and you're trying to be one of 20 vendors to, differentiate yourself, I think having, a personality really matters, right? Because people, don't like to buy from robots, right? And so if you're human, and now that we're all on Zoom calls all the time, it's harder because you don't have that human connection that's really easy to engage with when you meet somebody in person. And so you need to have a personality. And that's one thing that Jason Widup, our VP marketing, has, right? We create a ton of content, and we definitely have a personality, and we're pretty fun, and we're not stuffy. And that's something that people tend to really engage with, but you need to bring value. And so if you were a salesperson and you want to sell something to someone, first thing is they need to see you as a value add, right? They need to, see that every time they engage with you, they learn something. So it's going to make them want to respond to your emails, and you can't just ask for the business right away. You have to make sure that one, they trust you, and two, like they're getting value of the engagement, and you understand their needs, right? And once you understand their needs and how they're measured, then you can say, hey, I think, based on our relationship and based on your needs, like I think this could make sense if you did X, Y, and Z, and that's when you can go and have that pricing conversation. But being a pushy salesman is not working like it used to, right? And that's one of the things that I think is critical, is understanding, your buyer, what their needs are, how they're measured, and how you can make their life easier so that, you can essentially have an opportunity to offer them a solution that, you can get paid on at the end of the day.
Totally. Yeah. What I'm hearing from all these answers is really the bar is being raised for what it takes to not only do sales, but all these other roles, right? Like you need to understand deeply, not just who you're selling to, where they hang out, et cetera, but like how they do their job, to be able to have conversations the way that your buyers are expecting to have those conversations today is like much more in depth than I think it was before. I think the way that people saw salespeople before was they have information on this product or the features or maybe a bit of the market, but now it's like, you understand how to potentially do this other person's job. Maybe it's a designer, like you understand the decisions that they're making on a day-to-day basis, or as a salesperson, what their workflows are like, or as a marketer, what the challenges they're having across these different platforms. And that's really the value that you're providing, not just the product, but in terms of being I know we talk a lot about consultative sales and all this stuff, but really being a consultant. And one of the things that I always looked at when I was selling at Stripe and now at Cord is the value that I bring to customers that's unique is that I'm getting this broad lens of things. I'm talking to 20 other, Oscars a week and can provide insights onto how other people are solving this problem. And I think that's something that's, I think a lot of other people need to look at that way of selling. And also for other people in marketing and success, et cetera, like they're going to be drawn into that world as well. Really having to better understand their customers.
Hey, Ross, can I answer Chris's question? Because we're just going through this right now. And so, please. We've crossed the double-digit, million barrier recently, and we're about to close the Series B. And so we're exactly where this question is being asked. And so what we've done here historically at Metadata is that there is a sales team, and the sales team is focused on net new. The CS team, customer success team, is handling renewals and upsells. Now, we have just rolled out our first account manager. And one of the things that we're thinking as a business is we don't want to pay people twice for doing the same thing. And so the way that we have structured the account management role is that this person will target current customers and they will go after new stakeholders. And it's because marketing budgets are typically broken down by geos, by product line, so on and so forth. And our customer success managers don't necessarily have the time to go grow those accounts and spend time understanding who's who in the zoo and how they're measured and so on. So what we've done is the account manager is essentially being paid on increasing the customer value, but by targeting different stakeholders. Sometimes they can be brought in to help on a renewal if the CSM feels they need help on something. But overall, we're trying to essentially go after different teams at the company level so that we can grow it. We work with huge enterprises like Juniper Networks, for example, have 20 different business lines. And so we know we're not targeting all 20 business lines. And so that is the role of it. And I think it's important to wait to bring in account management until you have large accounts. Because I believe that CSMs, and here most of my CSMs were marketers, that is true. They'd never done sales, they'd never done renewals for the most part, and so we had to teach them. But I think CSMs are much better. They have a much better tight connection with the customer than a salesperson will have. And it's much easier for them if you can train them to do upsells and do so easily, right? Because there's trust already built there. And so having a salesperson, that's, always, asking for more business, sometimes will rub the customer the wrong way. And from a business, P&L standpoint, you don't really want to be paying two people on commissions on something that could be done by one person. So I think those are the things that are important to evaluate. But you need customers that are large is my 2 cents here, because that way they'll have different teams that you can target.
No, that's super helpful. Very tactical advice, and coming from someone who's doing it right now, it's super helpful. Curious to get Kyle's perspective on this, as well as Bill's question around the reporting structure. As someone who's kind of a bit later in the stages and seeing maybe some of the implications of these decisions. So we're talking about, how do you split out account management, sales function, CS team, who's really driving the expansion? Because it feels like very two different roles, right? How do you make current customers successful and drive usage and value? And how do you map new stakeholders? So curious to hear, Kyle, if you've approached this in the past and any learnings for folks that get to that stage.
Yeah, well, I guess the theme here is it comes back to ultimately building for that customer experience. So I don't think if you're in a leadership role, like, us on this call or anyone else out there that's listening, you can't come in and say, did this at prior company, it's going to work here. So for us, for example, it was about understanding, who's going to be buying the product, how we support them, and what makes sense at different stages of the journey. So when I came in, there's nobody in a sales role. Typically, I think Olivier just kind of hinted at this. It's like you're going to bring in pre-sales folk, in our case as account executive. So we had mainly built out mid-market and enterprise AE teams to focus on conversion of customers to that business tier. And then what was different about us is where a lot of companies will have maybe like a sales engineer, solutions architect, you'll have all these different roles that'll be ratioed to salespeople, both on the pre-sales and the post-sales side. For us, we didn't have as much of that. So we'd actually kind of built this new role that was called design advocate, which was very similar to, in many ways, like a sales engineer for a very technical product. But these people historically, like, bringing in former marketers to do CS, they'd never worked closely with salespeople. They were from the Figma community, designers by trade, really loved the product, and were already advocating for it, but weren't supporting us in terms of like doing really technical demos. So we have a technical part of the process to onboarding and interviewing for Figma, but we can't expect people to, know such a robust tool at the level that they could actually be designers. So we work with designers. We do scaled resources. So we call them live demos, because I guess webinars is doesn't gel as well with designers. We do one-to-one deep dives for all the different personas. If you're a PM, designer, UX writer, so on and so forth. So that was one thing that we scaled. And then eventually, yes, we got to a point where we wanted to build out an account management team. We didn't do customer success because I think we wanted to build both a sales culture and team where we have a technology sale in PLG. You turn it on, you can use some aspects of Free or Pro. We can flip you over to these different tiers of the product, but there is not a huge lag to finding value, and there's not a huge need in terms of implementation. So it's not a one size fits all. That's not going to work for some companies. Every company and their approach and model is going to be different. For us, that allowed us to build an account management team that was supporting renewals, minimizing contraction, churn, but also primarily driving expansion within these accounts. And so one of the things that we did, and this was kind of built off past experience. So Dropbox, we got to this point, a lot of large companies, once they move towards going public or go public, you've got like this massive team supporting each customer. And it's both really confusing internally. Dropbox is like notorious for reorgs, but it's also really confusing for the customer, because it's like, oh, well, Ross is my AM, Oscar is my CS, so on and so forth. You've got this team of 6 people. As people move around the organization, they leave the organization, they get promoted, they change teams. It just creates a ton of friction. So early on, I wanted to be super clear that you had one customer point of contact during the relationship at any given time. And the responsibility, whether the metric was for, CSAT, expansion, minimizing contraction, churn, it fell on one person. So that's the kind of model we've moved to. I'd say now that the sales team is probably 120 people, including like leadership and supported roles around the world. We're at the phase where we are building out a solutions architect team. So we brought someone in to build that team out. And I think under that, we're starting to think about like a technical CS org. So inevitably, you get to a place where if you support larger and larger companies, and Olivier mentioned this, multiple business lines, and things start to break down out of the box, you've got to start going back to the well and revisiting that customer journey and saying, okay, where would we drop a specific profile? What is their background? Doing all the work to scope out the JD and hiring that person, but how does it make sense? Who do they report into? And how does it basically align with that philosophy of like simplicity, which I think ultimately, even if we're a massive organization, we don't want to get away from that, because creating a confusing customer experience is like ultimately we're trying to avoid. But that's a little bit about how we thought about it. We didn't do CS, was kind of coming into the fold late, but it was AE and AM, and being a land and expand business, we didn't hand over the customer at close. There's actually true up expansion windows built into the contract. And so based on segment, enterprise holds customers for 6 months after the close, and mid-market for 3. SMB passes it over at transaction. So kind of aligns with that velocity to top-down sale we talked about a little bit earlier.
I'm sorry, Rod. I just want to add one more thing here. And so one of the things that we do here is that we love land and expand. And I don't want somebody to oversell a deal, right? Because it's going to break the trust, and the likelihood of the customer wanting to keep doing business with you down the road is not good. And so one thing that we do here is that all account executives, because they don't handle the renewals, they get 5 keepers a year. And so we don't want to overpromise. So we say, hey, you know what? I know you can spend $1 million a month through our platform if you did everything with us, but hey, you can start at 50K or 100K. But within 6 months, right, if we're successful, they're going to bring that over. And so we had a lot of customers last year that started small with us, and the account executive got paid on, they got 0 on the first deal, but whenever the renewal came up, it was sometimes like 5 times higher ARR. They got paid on that. And so that ensured that the account executive is helpful the entire way through. They're not overselling, they're not breaking trust, and their priorities are aligned, and the way they make money is aligned with the health of the business. And so I'm a huge fan of keepers for net new sales team.
I love how creative all these ideas are. Like, this is not what you hear when you're reading, some of the standard advice or books or SaaS or whatever. Like, these are some really creative first principle, like customer experience journey first processes across, things that sound standard: account management, customer success, like SEs, reps, et cetera, even for enterprise or upper mid-market deals, even outside of just the world of bottoms up freemium or trials. So I think, some really awesome takeaways, and some ideas that are already going to my mind. How do we do some of this stuff in kind of that unique way? Oscar, any points to add there? If not, I have another really great question for y'all.
No, I think I'm learning here.
Same here.
We all are.
Yeah, exactly. I knew something was going to pop off with this group, but I feel like a lot of stuff to rethink how we're doing things or plans for the future with our orgs on the revenue side. But I think a great question, Oscar, for you to start, because I know you've done a lot of hiring and building out these early teams at Scratchpad. On this theme of creativity, how have you thought about how to, really build a team quickly? Like, we can talk all day about the great, unique things that you can do for hiring, but a lot of it takes a lot of time to stand out. So I'm curious, how do you balance both the need to get butts in seats and to build the team and kind of keep that bar high, with the war on talent today, with, attrition, retention, all this kind of stuff. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I have some thoughts. I don't have much to share on speed. I think every one of us is struggling with hiring people and growing the teams and finding the people that will fit in. So I can't really give much in terms of how to do it faster. But from our approach, the way we've been able to find people is not focusing so much on the resume, but being more interested in the motivations and the competencies. And what that's done for us, it's allowed us to hire people that don't traditionally look like they would be for the job. But when you dig into their motivations and their competencies, they've come into Scratch, but they've done very well. Like for example, on the revenue workflow specialist team that I was talking about earlier, on that team, we have a drug addiction therapist. We have multiple people from the theater industry. We have wine sommeliers. We have people who are classically trained chefs. We have people who spent, their first 7-8 years in the retail industry. And really it's because the competencies that we're looking for really lend well with people that come from those backgrounds, So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's something that I think what has helped us a lot is not being confined by the resume or the school they went to or the industry that they come from. That's helped us find some really stellar talent in places that you might not traditionally look.
Yeah, no, I mean, this theme keeps on coming up, right? As more companies hire, more VC funding, like more success, like there's only going to be so many people that have been there, done that, have the experience of what exactly you're looking for, right? And I think a lot of the themes we're talking about is like this first principle thinking. Do you need someone who's done that for 5 or 10 years, figure out this new way of doing things, or does it in a way hold you back? But I guess maybe a follow-up question tied to that for Olivier would be, I know you mentioned you've hired CS folks without sales experience. Like, if you're hiring people with different backgrounds, how do you think about setting them up for success, right? Because I think there is, at least in my mind, you can't just hire these people, hey, go do this job that someone else has done for 10 years and expect the same output for them. How do you think about bringing them up to speed, supporting them, training, et cetera, enablement in this kind of new world of hiring?
Yeah. So I think there's different stages to growth, right? And so the first thing I'll say is I got here as a seed round. And so, we'll have some announcement coming up in the next week. And so we raised our A a couple, about a year and a half ago. And so the people I was looking for when I got here, and I've been here for 2.5 years, were very different than the people I'll be looking for over the next 6 months, right? So we're going from 10 reps to 35 reps if we can hire on time in the next 6 months. And so the types of people that we bring on now are going to be different than the type of people that I brought on early. The types of people I brought on early, it was like, one, I was fortunate. I had a lot of people I've worked with in the past that wanted to work here, and they were really good. I mean, I had managers at last company that came here as an individual contributor because they wanted to be here, and now they're going back into management a couple of years later. And so now we're looking for it, and it depends on the role, but the first thing I'm looking for is just like drive, hustle, things that you can't teach, right? Curiosity. That's one of the things I love understanding what are the aspirations of this person over the next 2 to 5 years, right? You can't just hire everyone that says, I want to be a VP of sales. Your team cannot be just 50 people who want to be VPs of sales, because some people are not going to be happy. You need some people who are like, I want to be an enterprise rep that makes $1 million a year. And you need some that want to be VP, but you have to think about the types of people that you're putting on the team. So the people that I was looking for early were people that could problem solve, really figure out. We didn't really have product market fit at that point, and that could really work with product and say, here's what the customer wants. And then and now we know we have a product market fit. Our product works really well, and so now we have to add bodies to it. And so if anyone's listening and you're looking to get in MarTech, please hit me up because I'm definitely hiring. I'm also hiring another 30 CSMs as well. And our CSMs manage revenue here. So I think it'd be a pretty exciting experience because in some cases CSMs don't get to do that. But I think the people I'm looking for now are going to be different than the people I hired in the past. The cool thing is, once you get more stable as a business, people are there's a lot of people that are not, risk takers out there, not with their jobs, right? And for me, I don't gamble. I don't take risk outside of work, but I bet on companies all the time, and I've been fortunate. And so that's the type of people we're looking for. Is people that maybe work at LinkedIn now or work at a large company that want to try a company that's at this stage that we're at.
Totally. No, that's a helpful perspective on just like the evolution of the types of people that you hire at different stages. I think that's something that's rarely talked about. I think people give these lessons of and these are the types of people that work for these roles, but stages, the stage of the company matters so much to the success of an individual. Kyle, curious to hear if you have any insight on this. I know you've hired people from, they've thought about these teams in a unique way, enablement, I've heard from folks on your team that are, feel very supported. So curious to hear how you build a culture around that.
Yeah. And actually, I think, I'd say themes from what both these guys just shared, but I think one part is, especially I think earlier on, not like you get away from it as you get a little bit later stage. And so I think the stage part's important. I'll come back to that. But, one of our top enterprise sellers was on Broadway 3 years before she joined Figma and had spent her whole life dedicated to that. And so it was really cool to see her come in, learn the design, product, present, and ultimately take some feedback in the process. But I knew there was something there, and now seeing her thrive and finding this what she's calling, I think, a second chapter in tech sales is really cool. And so I think that's part of it is understanding people, their motivation, their aptitude, and realizing, especially in COVID, I think tenure is definitely underrated. And so it's good to be at a company and stick it out through the good times and the bad and learn and grow. But I think as hiring managers and all of us leaders on the call, we have to understand that a lot happened in the world. People are coming from all different backgrounds, maybe wanting to get into tech, maybe leaving a job for a certain reason, flexibility around hybrid, remote, whatever it may be. And so I think just understanding the motivation, I think was what Oscar said, is tell me about how did you get here? And each step along the way, were you thoughtful about the decisions that you made, the risks that you might have taken on in terms of early stage versus not? And, the nature of risk is this startup thing doesn't work out every time. And to leave a startup that either has poor leadership, doesn't have, the right business approach, or doesn't have a team that you think you want to continue to learn from and be supported by, nothing wrong with that. You know, that's part of it as well. We've probably all had a couple of missteps in our career along the way. But the other thing is something we've talked about, Ross, in the past, but I still highlight this Harvard Business Review article from like 2006. It talks about the sales learning curve. And early on, when I walked in, we weren't a seed stage company, but we were Series B. And again, we were all building product, and I'm sure the product-led growth. There was nobody in customer-facing roles. And so the kind of people that you're bringing in then, they need to be not only excited about ambiguity, but being able to operate and be successful in that time, because we didn't have a playbook. We didn't have any of these things. Yeah, that's the article. There you go. It was about bringing in people who kind of had like entrepreneurial bugs and spirits. I think whether, you know, you're founding your own company like Ross or the rest of us on this call, in many ways, we're all like entrepreneurs, because you go to these early stage companies and you're building, whether you're the president, you're the VP, the head of, you're building out your team, your function, your practice, and you have to collaborate cross-functionally and find people that want to be in this stage of the businesses today. And so for Figma, we're a scale up. So we're talking about going from 120 something salespeople, 500, 600 employees to 1,000 plus, 250 on the sales side. And it's a different phase in terms of people that maybe aren't ready to go from LinkedIn to seed stage, right? They're like, all right, LinkedIn's been great. I've learned so many great skills. It's safe in many ways, but I want to go be in a fast-paced startup that's maybe pre-IPO that has a great product in a new arena that's totally new to me. I never sold a design. I don't know anything about design. So I think also finding people that even if they're right for the phase, they're still very excited about the mission that you're on. They're excited about working with customers, and they quite frankly get it. You know, if you just want to come join Figma because we're a Series F company worth $10 billion on paper, you're not going to do well here. You have to be interested in the products that we're building, the market that we're going after, and the kind of community and the energy that you can absorb by just doing research about us online. I mean, a big part of why we have a product aspect to the interview process is to see, not can Ross come in and be a designer, but can you put in the time? Like, are you that interested in the job to just put in the time to learn something? You end up kind of crossing the mountain so that your base level knowledge of our products and the industry in which we're in is, you know, just much higher. But if people aren't willing to do that, then, you know, it's maybe not the right fit for you. So I think, yeah, it's about fit. It's about being open to people's background and ultimately just like understanding where they're at in their journey and how thoughtful they've been for that. So I guess just seconding what both of these guys said, but I agree with all of it.
Totally.
One thing I think is important to note, though, is that this is the most competitive job market that I've ever been associated with.
100%.
And so flow, right, similar to how you think about marketing, right? You need leads at the top of the funnel and they need to work down the funnel. You need to do the same thing here, right? And so one of the things that we're doing here is that, you know, we're hiring recruiters. So there's this book called The Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge. And what HubSpot did is remarkable. It's probably one of the companies I admire the most. And what they did is they had recruiters that they paid like salespeople, and that was their job. It's just recruit to bring in people, right? Because you can't depend on third party or outsourced recruiters now, because they're getting paid no matter what, right? And there's so many people hiring that those recruiters are getting paid, and so you need to do it. Like the recruiter we just brought on board, I reached out to her. Several marketers that we just hired, we do the outreach. The executives in the company spend time outreach to people, and guess what? Those people, people are like, whoa, I'm getting outreach by, people that work at the company. I'm going to, take that. So if you're having a hard time recruiting, one is hire somebody internally and treat them like a salesperson. And their job is to essentially bring candidates. And the other thing is have your executives do outreach.
Yeah. If your senior leaders aren't doing outreach, other companies are, and you're not getting those top hires. That's just where the bar is today, for sure.
And another thing, I think we kind of talk about it at Figma, is that similar to if you're in a sales role and it's about pipeline and feeding top of funnel to make sure that you have a chance to convert and ultimately hit your numbers and be successful consistently, it's the same for hiring managers. Just like a salesperson can't wait for marketing to feed them leads is the only way to get to their number. All the hiring managers here are also doing their own sourcing and trying to funnel to help calibrate on profiles, just add more, because to Olivia's point, like in my 15-year career, this is the craziest hiring market I've ever seen. And so it's good because it's a candidate's market in many ways, but we all need to be kind of adding to the volume in terms of not lowering the bar, finding amazing people, and finding people from, all over the globe. I think continue to focus on diversity in terms of their background, their skill sets, and how they can come in and add new energy to the culture and to the business.
Totally. Yeah. That's it's a crazy world. It's funny. Like my first time even being a hiring manager, let alone starting a company, coming into this crazy market has been a big learning experience. But like even our, my co-founder, our CTO leading engineering, he's spending a significant portion of his week doing outbound as if he was an SDR to candidates, because that is what it takes today to hire. And I think speaking of some of the stage appropriateness that we were talking about, it's really been interesting to see how many people that are joining, a seed stage, nearly Series A stage company that have entrepreneurial aspirations. And I think that's something that I really enjoy about the world of like pre-IPO high growth startups, is like the types of people that are drawn to these companies and that intensity are people that are obsessed with learning, that are super curious, that, potentially want to either start their own thing or their own organization at a company, which is, that kind of like entrepreneurship, whatever that word was that I learned in business school. I think it's just like a much more fun environment, and it's a great group of people to be around. And, speaking about some of these things of like hiring people from, Oscar said, hiring sommeliers or, and great would-be enterprise sellers that were on Broadway, or ex-marketers that are now, closing deals and looking at, the revenue goals in their pipeline every day. It's super interesting, I think, and it's way more fun to build a business from this kind of unique, angle that we've all been talking about, with blending all these orgs and roles and goals, and really looking at it from that buyer first, customer first approach. So some awesome takeaways and learnings for myself, and hopefully the folks out there that have been listening in. But we'll do a write-up on this stuff. I know we got about 100 folks of the 300 plus join. I think most people, as we're talking about, like to consume things async and product led. So that's where we're going to probably see most of the engagement. But yeah, any kind of final takeaways? I do want to make sure that, I know a lot of folks that are listening in know people that are looking for roles at awesome companies under great leaders. So I want to make sure we get a shout out for folks here that are hiring. Maybe just a couple words about, key roles or the company, and then we can sign off. Olivia, you want to kick us off, and we'll go around, and then
Sure.
Yeah.
First thing I'll say is we are remote first. We do have a hub in Denver and in Chicago, but half our employees are international. The other half is in the US, and we're remote first. And I think that is really the future of building great companies and culture, is the ability to work wherever you want.
For sure. Oscar, I saw you just put in the chat, but yeah, any particular roles or teams that you think you're stoked about that you're hiring for?
We're hiring across the board, but I think what's worth sharing is that what's unique about Scratchpad that I've observed being I've been a part of other companies, I've started my own companies, is that we as a company are really driven by our mission to make salespeople happy. And we have this group of people who, everything that we do, from designing the product to marketing to sales to support, it's all driven with this one mission to make salespeople happy. And I would say that the second thing that makes it a really unique environment is that we really intentionally live by our core values. And those values are simplicity, ideas, results, speed, and people. And every day when we work, we call those out. So I think anybody who's looking for an environment where you have a company that's mission driven, that's focused on core values, and not focused on putting boxes around you. We want you to grow in any way that we can. Scratchpad's are definitely a great environment to check out.
Awesome.
And I'll vouch for Oscar. We are a customer. We love their product. Their CEO, Puyan, is amazing. And I think, if you guys are considering them, you'd be very happy to get an opportunity to join them. I'm a big fan of Scratchpad.
And Kyle, I'm sure everyone needs to jump in a second, but yeah, Kyle, any particular roles or teams that you're super excited about?
Yeah, no, I'll keep it quick. I know we're at time, so thank you everyone for attending. We're hiring across all teams on the sales, account management side, a bunch of new roles coming online. We're hybrid, so we have an office in SF, and New York, which is fun if you happen to be in those locations. But we've got people across the country. One of our leaders on the account management team lives an hour outside of Madison and has like goats and pigs. So I think the beauty of this world is we're finding amazing talent across the board, and we are also very mission driven. And so our mission is to make design accessible to all. The sales culture is very unique, and so I'd say check out the careers page. Reach out to me if you ever want to chat after, and hopefully only big things to come from Figma moving forward.
Totally. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much for taking time out of your super busy schedules on the Tuesday after the long weekend. I learned a ton. Hopefully this was super helpful for other folks out there. We'll send out the recording and some notes on this, but yeah, thank you so much for joining and hosting the panel here, everyone, and appreciate everyone tuning in.
Thank you, Ross. See y'all.
Happy building.